No, I know, but give me a second. There we go. All right.
Call over the September 18th meeting of HALRB. Please call the roll.
Amari Davis.
Here.
Andrea. Here. Robert Dutka.
Here.
Andrew Fackler.
Here.
Carmela Ham.
Here.
Ray Henley.
Here.
Gerald Report.
Here.
Joan Lawrence. Here. Rebecca Meyer. She's on it. Katie Myers. Mark Turnbull. Andrew Winchell.
Here.
Dick Woodruff. Hey, Dick, are you here? You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Sorry. Okay.
Great. All right, thank you all. And, now the explanation tonight, so here are procedures. So I'll begin tonight's meeting. So effective September 1, 2022, newspaper legislation now requires certain county appointed boards and commissions, including HALRB, to have in-person forum to conduct its business. HALRB hearings are provided in a hybrid environment, both in-person and streamed online. Members of the public may attend and participate either virtually or in person. Members of the board and members of the public join us this evening. A couple of things. Today's meeting is available to stream via a Teams link on the county website. There's also a dial-in phone option if you wish to use it. If board members, presenters, speakers lose connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us via phone. Just keep your device muted and your video turned off until you're called on to speak. Public speakers not sponsoring items on the agenda. Pre-registration to speak at today's hearing was required. Speaker slips are available at the front of the room for those in-person speakers, and I'll call you to speak after the presentation of the agenda item. The meeting chat is active for participants who technical assistance only and should not be used for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. Public comments must be shared verbally for record during the silent public testimony period. All voting will be done by call of the roll. Lastly, it's a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted on the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. And that, move on to the review and hopeful approval of the August minutes. Are there any comments or concerns, doubts about the minutes from August? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second. Please call the roll.
Please respond yes if you support the motion. Amari Davis.
Yes.
Andrea.
Yes.
Robert Dutka.
Abstain.
Andrew Fackler.
Yes.
Ray Henley.
Yes.
Gerald Laporte.
Yes.
Joan Lawrence. Yes. Becca Meyer. Andrew Winchell.
Yes.
Dick Woodruff. Hi, Dick, you're still muted. Try one more time. I can see, I see you. But you're still muted. No, you're talking to it. I don't know. Dick, do you support the motion? Can you try one more time to unmute your computer? Because we can't hear you.
He could nod his head, I guess.
Chat.
Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Dick, I think you're gonna have to, you can't unmute, then I think you need to jump off and jump back in.
We understand.
We will. Motion carries, but I think maybe we had him as absent
Absent
from the
vote.
vote until
Yeah.
he figures out his
Yeah.
tech issues.
Okay. Okay,
Motion carries.
all right, okay. All right, so with that, we have consent agenda items. We have 5 actually. So there's the, you can see them here. There's COA 24-18 at 4825 North Randolph Street. There's also one, so COA 24-19 at 311 North Leave Road. There's also COA 24-20 at 3322 23rd Street North, Maywood Historic District. There's also COA 24-21 at 1961 North Republic Street, Mount Salvation Baptist Church District. And lastly, we have COA 24-09A, 2725 23rd Road North, Maywood Historic District. Are there any questions or concerns about any item and these 5 items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I move that the HLRB approves the certificates of appropriateness as listed on the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, please respond yes if you support the motion. Laurie Dick,
Yes.
Nan Dreyer,
Yes.
Robert Dutka,
Yes.
Andrew Fackler,
Yes.
Amrella Ham,
Yes.
Ray Henley,
Yes.
Gerald Ford,
Yes.
Joan Lawrence,
Yes.
Rebecca Meyer. Yes. Katie Myers,
Yes.
Andrew Winchell,
Yes.
Dick Woodruff,
Yes.
motion carries.
Did I abstain on the previous motion?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. There we go. All right, so with that, there are a couple administrative COAs on the list. You can review them there. And that brings us to page 2 here, essentially. Brings us to an item, the informational item, Arlington Historical Society Memorializing Slave in Arlington project.
Yeah, and before we start there, I just want to thank anyone who's here for the consent agenda. Your items were approved and you are good to leave the meeting. So thank you all for joining us in person and virtually. Thank you. Can you join the table first?
See, I have my back to the camera, but
You know, we can squeeze you in over here. Yeah, that's fine. Although we can see you're in view in the camera. It'll just be a side profile.
You can sit here if you want, but.
that works better.
Well, the camera's.
For the,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right in that.
So Tim, before you jump in, I just kind of want to mention a little bit of the project to everybody. So this is something that you all are familiar with because the Arlington Historical Society has come to the HLRB previously to get at least a set of the memorialized and enslaved in Arlington stones, also known as the stumbling stones, and you've approved that project. And the Arlington Historical Society has been very fortunate to receive support from the county to go to the next phase. And so Tim's going to be talking to us about this. And we wanted there to be at least a moment where the HLRB reviews kind of the whole package at this time. It's an informational item. There's no motion that needs to be made on this. And we felt that it would make sense for there to be at least an overview of the project. With the understanding that after the HLRB kind of is here, can ask some questions about the project, then most of the process will be at the administrative level with our program, as well as the Department of Environmental Services concerning the location of where some of these stones will potentially go. And but we do know that they would come back to us if there were any stumbling stones possibly in a local historic district boundary area. So I just wanted to kind of give a general overview of why we're hearing this item, and that you might hear more about the project later on. So Tim, if you would introduce yourself to everybody.
Thank you. My name is Tim Aiken, Arlington County, longtime Arlington County resident. Been involved in public policy issues, and sort of the genesis of this idea was an article that Michelle Norris wrote back in June of 2021, recognizing the efforts of Germany to try to come to terms with its Nazi past. And her question that she posited in the article was, can we do the same for our two sins of slavery and treatment of Native Americans? And that got us thinking, unfortunately, in discussions with Arlington Historical Society about what we could do, and what exactly was a deeper, fuller story of our past. And through that research efforts, well, we're not the only ones that are engaged in this discussion. National Trust for Historic Preservation has amazing historic properties. Many of them, however, had long removed any vestiges of the slave quarters at southern plantations in the States. And as they struggle through this issue, this is sort of the quote that was drawn in, that ourselves and our ancestors and our generations to preserve and share the full American story, a much deeper, greater accounting of the past. And it's an interesting verse that, in fact, is used by the German artist who came up with the concept of stumbling stones over in Germany, which is one of the ways that they're working through their past, is to put brass markers, 3-inch markers at the sites of Holocaust victims, noting the names of the individuals and the dates of their lives. And he uses the quote, "A person is only forgotten when his or her name is forgotten." So I don't mean to dwell on this slide here, but sort of that in the way of a background is that, yes, we do have a history here in Arlington, and it deserves to be told and shared with the public and better inform us about who we are and where we came from. So the project itself really has some broad goals of telling, again, the unknown history of the country's enslaved population, providing the names when possible for the enslaved individuals, honoring their memory through the placement of these bronze plaques that would be marked at locations where they once lived, and helping us, again, recognize a part of the past that many of us are not familiar with. Next slide. The research is rather fascinating, and I've been less removed, or I'm not as engaged in it as some of the other people, but we have a, largely led by Jessica Kaplan with the Arlington Historical Society, have really dug deeply in probing lots of data, including county resources, both in the land records as well as the library, but ancestry.com, gravestones, all sorts of sources. And through that process and that research, identified about 130 landowners who held enslaved people, and well over, I think we're up to about 1,700, the fact that there were at least some 1,700 enslaved here in Arlington, of which we have the names of about 800. Go on to the next slide. So again, our efforts, in addition to identifying who the enslaved are in Arlington, is where we can and where the records are available, telling a deeper story about those individuals. And there's a site on the Arlington Historical webpage where Jacob's Ladder, climbing Jacob's Ladder, is the story of those enslaved, where we have a much greater history. There's a spreadsheet also on there that lists all of the 1,400. It's very difficult to work, but we're, with the county's resources, we'll be improving that website so it's a much more navigable listing of the enslaved, with links to the various resources and sources from where that information was collected. An interactive map, again, showing where the 130 sites the landowners were located, and being able to click on that and pull up the names of the enslaved. So it will be a very interactive online map. As Lauren mentioned, our sort of beta testing was at the Ball Sellers House where the first 3 bronze plaques were placed. The original design was square, and I think in working with Arlington County and Department of Environmental Services, we've opted for something that is, I think, a little bit more feasible and practical, and that's a round 6-inch brass plaque. So get the next slide. Okay, right. This is the timeline that we've shared with the county, which will be incorporated into the county's website, I believe, talking about Arlington's past. Next slide. That's, again, the spreadsheet as it looks now. View of the northern half of the interactive map that we have to develop, and a listing of all the various locations and the enslavers. The next map. These are the stories that we have developed to date based on the research of those individuals. Next slide. Okay. So in working with Department of Environmental Services this past June, the county approved with a county manager's signature a memorandum of agreement between the Arlington Historical Society and Arlington County, sort of a process and delineation of responsibilities for the placement of these bronze markers. That partnership, Arlington. Sorry, I'm on the wrong slide here. Okay, this is what we're working with Arlington County Public Schools. We're developing a partnership with them to incorporate the material and the information we've learned into actual lesson plans with the county. We're also working with the technical, as a county technical education classes to actually manufacture the bronze plaque. Have a capacity of about 15 per semester. So that's where the initial rounds of the brass plaques will be developed. And then we are engaged with community learning as well by creating events, a website, and the events that tied to the actual placement and unveiling of the brass plaques when they're placed at various locations around the county. Next slide. This is what they look like in over in Europe. And again, there's more than 70,000 of them that have been placed to honor and recognize victims of the Holocaust. Next slide. Again, developing a much deeper story about what has happened here in Arlington and the history of enslaved people. That's you can see where the 3 brass plaques are placed outside of the Ball Sellers House. Next slide. Ours, again, originally was going to be square, but again, working with DES, circular is easier because they're able to bore into the ideal placement is going to be in sidewalks, flush with the sidewalk. And a boring device that is currently in use by the county is one that they would use. So their preference is to go with a circular 6-inch bronze plaque. On that plaque will be the name of the enslaved, birth and death dates if we can find them. Again, the idea here is that it's going to be a kind of a powerful reminder, particularly as more of these are placed all around the county, to recognize how pervasive and extensive the enslaved were once within the county. About a third of the county's population at the time of George Washington's presidency were enslaved. Now we're at the memorandum of agreement. Sorry. The county recognizes that our efforts in collaboration with the county are helping fulfill the county's own commitments to equity. Arlington Historical Society's responsibility is to produce the bronze plaques that we will be doing with Arlington County Public Schools to produce them. We'll be obtaining any permits if needed, but I think the primary desire is to do it within the county right of way so that it would minimize the amount of any need for any further permitting requirements. Generate a list of locations, which we sort of recommended at this point, they're merely recommendations, but for where the first 15 would be placed at 7 locations around the county sometime this fall, once they're produced by the public school students. The Arlington Historic Society would have ownership of them and would have a responsibility for replacing any of the damaged ones. And the county essentially will bear the cost and effort to install the plaques, assist in the replacement, and they're also developing a GIS information system to identify where the locations are. Did I miss anything?
Did you say how many of these there eventually would be?
Well, as much as people and resources are willing to bear, there's a potential for 800, I guess, based on the names that have been covered to date, but more research might yield more. Resources may dry up long before we ever reach the 800 number. So it's anyone's guess, but it can go on for quite some time.
What's the per stumbling stone cost?
Around a little under $100 each.
Oh,
I noticed that one of the stumbling stones was, it was unknown male or something like that. And so, but from what you said just now, Tim, it seems like you're only going to put stumbling stones where you can identify the name. Is that correct? Which is correct?
That's generally correct. The one unknown, just additional background material, but there was a 1850 census. Most of the census data were that the federal government collected was only interested in knowing the number of enslaved and their approximate age and what their profession was. So they never asked for a name, whereas when they went up to a white person, they would, a family or a residence, to get their information, they would record the names of all the family members. What was interesting in the Ball Sellers house, and this is when the Carlin family, second generation, was there living at the Ball Sellers house. They identified three enslaved people, but there was an unknown. One of the unknowns is a 6-year-old boy listed as of mixed race who worked the farm. What's interesting is 1860 census lists a 16-year-old boy living with the Carlin family by the name of Washington Roberts. So we could say, but we can't definitely say, but perhaps in discussions with descendants of the Carlin family or things, we may learn the name and then we would go back and place a name there. But as you know, with history, you never know what you sort of uncover.
Well, since you're going to have this website that sort of matches, I mean, you can put footnotes on the website, okay, and you can explain how you reach this conclusion and let readers, you know, for example, the example that you just gave, you could footnote that on the website. People draw their own conclusions as to whether they agree with the conclusions of your research.
So sort of talked about the future plans there. I see even more ambitious plans to where I sort of envision, as Michelle Norris did, of a national program that would recognize this. But I think we have to prove the concept and viability here locally. I really appreciate your interest and the county's support of this effort so far.
Will the staff of the Historic Preservation Office be, I know that from what Lauren said, it will, this will only come back to us if you want to put stumbling stones in historic districts, okay? But will the staff be involved with the plaques where you decide to put them in non-historic districts?
Yes, I don't think we want to do anything without the county. And sorry, my background is also in public policy and politics, and I'm just very cautious. We don't want this to create any backlash or objections where people come to the county to raise objections to it. I think it is envisioned to placing everything within the county right of way, but we really do want to reach out and educate the public and engage them so that they're involved and hopefully fully on board with the idea of placing these on sites. And again, if there are objections at particular locations, these were in many cases large properties, and lots in Arlington are fairly small, so that there are alternative sites that hopefully we could find where if there was an objection, we could find an alternative site.
But you talked about the process for the identifying the first 15, okay? But after that, what's the process for, I mean, obviously you're gonna have to set priorities. Somebody's gonna have to set priorities and agree.
I think where we have the most information, the direction we're going is trying to, where we have the most information so that we can share that with the public. The school system only has the capacity to generate about 15. If we had additional resources and much greater yield of information, we could contract out potentially so that you could do, far more per semester and go outside the school system. But our goal is really, we want to work with the schools to produce these. And they have their own sort of ancillary projects that they have tied to production of these. So there is in fact a play, I guess, that Washington Liberty had on the Ball Sellers House. Slave living there.
If, hold on one second, Dick Woodruff had his hand up, he's on, online. Dick, did you want to ask a question? And you are muted, just so you know. And you're unmuted, great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I just want to say, I think this is a fantastic project. I really, really like it. And I completely agree with the notion that no one has ever forgotten that their names are remembered. And I only have one question about it, which is, did you say that the location of the stumbling stones would be associated with where those actual slaves lived and worked?
That's correct.
Great. Well, congratulations. I think this is a really fantastic project. Glad you're doing it.
And I see a role for both NEA and NEH. So knowing, wearing your past hats there, maybe we can collaborate in the future.
Okay, then.
I was going to very much say what Dick said. This is a fantastic project. And not just the stones, but the research that you all are doing, I think is just invaluable. I mean, pulling all of that data out of such difficult to get your hands on and then decipher resources. That list of resources that you all have consulted is really impressive, even for a historian, based group. A couple points I wanted to make is that I was very glad to see that the county gave $65,000, 25 to the Arlington Historical Society, 25 to the Black Heritage Museum. And was there another 15 for this project? So I think that's really outstanding. And if the county can find more, they made it really clear this was a one-time thing, but I think that was a budgetary reason, but hopefully the county will see the value in this and continue to do it. But that's really commendable that this has been both a private kind of voluntary effort and then also the county coming to the table. One of the things that we had mentioned last meeting that may be also of interest is once you've got some of these in place, there's, in addition to I know that also in Europe, there are sometimes sort of tours that are mapped out for the county or for the city or a neighborhood where a person can visit 6 sites and learn more about each of those sites and about the historic events that occurred. So it's not just a name and a farm name or a plantation name, but maybe through some kind of a learning circuit, you could integrate this in with a lot of the other historic sites, including some of the Civil War forts and things like that, and turn it into a real learning opportunity, not just for kids in school, but for anybody who would want to study or learn a little bit more about this history. And the point you made about this being 1/3 of the county at the time of the Revolution is one that ought to be pressed, because that means that most of what we see in the county, the roads and the structures, started out as being built by enslaved individuals, just like much of the city downtown. So that's really helpful. And I guess those were my main points.
You're on on point with the idea of walking tours. So there's actually one planned this fall, and maybe I could share it with Lauren that people are interested in. It's being organized on Columbia Pike. But we would envision a lot of the placements potentially along Glebe Road and Columbia Pike, which would be ideal for patients for some type of future walking tours.
Is there any chance you will work on Arlington House?
Of the 800, a good number of them stay.
Is the county,
Oh, we're working with the National Park Service. They have their own process by which we will need to go through before we can place it. But they're thinking along the same lines, trying to do something.
I'm struck by, I don't know if any of you watch Finding Your Roots on PBS with Henry Louis Gates, but usually just celebrities are the subjects of his research, but invariably he finds that these people have connections to formerly enslaved people, and what a wealth of course, he's got access to everything, but what a wealth of information might come from that. If there's any way to connect with the people who support that.
I'm curious to know, Tim, well, first off, before I jump into one of my questions, just to kind of clarify, I mean, right now we kind of have this review process kind of set behind the scenes where we will receive kind of renderings of what the stones are going to look like. And we'll talk about the location, and it's more just to be an assistance to have another set of eyes. And if there's any kind of things that we need to consider, such as the public's thoughts on where they're going to go, make sure that there's no opposition, will be a part of that process. And that's really for the 15 stones right now. The idea, though, is that if there's support to do more, that maybe we'll have to figure out what the agreement really is for the whole entire program, since there could be a potential of over 800 plus at some point. And we'll have to kind of see what the process would be after these 15 are done. But I mean, honestly, if, in my opinion, if the design doesn't change drastically and everything's moving smoothly and we haven't had any opposition from the public, I think that it's something that we might be able to just continue moving forward. Might be another opportunity to have them come back and talk about what's the next phase and how many they're looking at. But for now, I think we're pretty comfortable with what we're looking at with process. And I think everybody is in agreement that if we feel the HLRB should talk about a particular one, that if there's any concerns or they should have their input, we'll hopefully be able to have that moment if we get to that. The other thing I wanted to ask, though, is I loved you bringing up how much does it cost for each one. And I'm kind of curious, does the Arlington Historical Society have it already on their website to provide fundraising opportunities and support from the community for the project for future work?
I don't know how far that conversation has gone, but there are some thoughts about it. A number of these sites are near churches, for example, and the churches have expressed an interest, so asking them to pay for the plaques. And that's the model that Germany actually has developed with their Stolpersteine, they call the stumbling stones. There's a set of conditions that the community needs to petition. They need to reach out to any survivors of the families that they'll be placed and invite them to the ceremony. So there's a set of procedures by which they go by, but I said 70,000 in the side there, but I've seen other accounts where there's 100,000 here at this point. And that's not something that any one organization could probably underwrite. So a different model was developed for them in terms of how to pay for it. It's a possibility as well.
They're $100 a piece. That's not a lot of money.
I feel like there's a way to do maybe an adopt a program. I don't know. I think there's some creative approaches. So, but I also think it might even be trying to get other groups to partner on it so that it's not just all in the lift of the Arlington Historical Society. I think there's many opportunities, which would be really fantastic.
It's really timely with the 250th, all that stuff coming up soon too, to link into whatever events that end up being developed around that.
One last procedural question just came to mind. Have you all worked with the community associations in Halls Hill, for example, or Green Valley, or any of the traditionally Black neighborhoods of
I
Arlington?
have reached out, Halls Hill and, Green Valley and have done slide presentations for them. We are planning to speak, probably not until December, to the Civic Federation. So leadership of the local civic associations will all be somewhat familiar with it, concept. And then I'll leave with you a draft letter of how we would want to approach, I guess, the actual civic association where the plaques will be placed this fall, so that again, they have the heads up and an opportunity to engage before any action is taken.
Yeah, it strikes me that the park in the center of Green Valley would be a good location.
We have, Lomax Church for
Right,
the
yeah.
first recommendation,
I saw that.
in part because 2 of the enslaved are actually buried at the cemetery there. So we thought that might be a
Wow.
good location as well. But there's a long list by which we could certainly go back. So we're trying to be a little strategic in terms of the first set of.
I had a question. Would this generally just come under the HLRB's purview as landmark review board? Since these are sort of landmarks.
I mean, I think that's why we're bringing it forward now is that we want to have it be more of an informational item, as opposed to a blanket approval.
Right, I understood. Just curious.
Like with Max, for example, if they were to do that, in next meeting for district, they would definitely need to come back. Well, thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for all the hard work.
Yeah. Exciting project.
Yeah.
It really is.
Next, now the chair's report. Got a couple of items. I want to follow up on last week's discussion on legislative priorities. We discussed 2 items last week. The first one was sort of the idea of sort of expanding upon or sort of maybe providing recommendations on the recently passed sort of preservation bill. So the thought was kind of looking at staff at this point, we're not sure we necessarily want to escalate anything all the way up to the state level regarding the priorities. It's the idea is maybe to push recommendations more at the local level too. We also want to see how law actually starts, how it actually gets enacted here at local level. I mean, we figured that there actually may be a potential case coming up possibly soon as well. So we kind of want to feel out how it sort of hits. We actually escalate actual sort of verbose language to the state level. But that said, though, I will be issuing sort of a recommendation letter out to the county level, and I can pass on that draft language before actually handing it off to the county itself. And the second one was regarding was sort of the inclusion or promotion of preservation trades. We discussed that briefly last time, and for that one, again, sort of staff worked on this one as well, and they thought it's not necessarily anything that needs to be actually promoted all the way to state level. It's really more of a local sort of coordination issue. I mean, essentially, there's no demotion for like preservation only trade people now. It's more just kind of like getting them maybe like a little bit more visibility when people like when somebody needs like a window replacement or something. So it's not really like an actual issue. It needs to be elevated to the state level regarding legislation. Essentially, it's more like it'd be more coordination to be done. So that's where we stand on our 2 legislative priorities at this point. And aside from that, I think those were my only 2 major chair report updates here.
Okay. Well, we will end the meeting. Oh, Dick, you had a question?
Yeah. Can we get a status report on any further developments with respect to the Nellie Custis School issue and where that stands both in the historic preservation review process, but also in the planning process? What the latest is?
Yes, I can give you an update. So thanks for asking, Dick. So, so right now, Michael and I have been trying to figure out the timing of when research can kind of move forward with that local historic district application. But we don't really have any update on that just yet. We're working with leadership to kind of figure out where that is in our timeline. So I don't have too much of an update with that. However, I know that planning staff is reviewing with the site plan review process. They're going through that right now with the applicant because I believe they haven't formally accepted the 4.1 just yet. And so, but I think they are getting close. And once staff accepts it, then they'll start planning for setting up those meetings and the engagement. And that will be happening throughout the rest of 2024. And I think that as we're looking at the preliminary schedule to when that might go to the county board, it would probably be in early 2025. So, but because both of those processes are separate, right now, they don't meet unless we are told otherwise by county leadership that they should. And when we get that, if we get that notification, we will let you know. So that's the biggest update that I can think of right now with the Melwood project.
Okay, thanks. And I'm sure that I'll be asking the same question in future meetings. Thank you.
I'll try and anticipate that you'll ask me every month. But thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Dick. Right, so I will give the staff report, and it is the most riveting topic of the electronic meeting policy updates that we have from the county. So sorry to end on such a high note, but we have a couple updates that I need to share with you all. So bear with me; it might get a little bit boring, but there have been some updates to the policy at the state level, and there are some changes that we as a commission are going to have to make. So you all might remember that in September of 2022, there was an electronic meeting policy for commissions and boards that was enacted into state law. And it basically required that any commission that has members attending a meeting virtually, that they have to adopt an electronic meeting policy. And so the HALRB did so by including it into their bylaws, and you all approved that in August of 2020. This past summer, there were updates made to the electronic meeting policy, and now we are getting guidance from the county attorney's office that we need to make amendments to that. We need to adopt the new policy, and every year we're going to have to adopt an electronic meeting policy, but that we need to remove it out of the bylaws because it needs to be its own standing document, and it will make it a lot simpler for us to be able to continue updating that every year, because the likelihood is high that there will be continue to have updates to the meeting policy guided from the state. So what we are going to do, hopefully, is basically bring the bylaws forward, and per the current bylaws, we have to bring any update to the bylaws twice. So the first meeting you all would discuss it, and then it's at the second meeting that you would adopt the new bylaws. So at that time, we'll remove the current language, and then next year we'll adopt our own electronic meeting policy document. Right now, we're actually covered by the county board's electronic meeting policy. They put a like a clause in theirs that allows their policy to cover all the commissions. So there's no pressure in the immediate for us to adopt something. It's just to try to get administratively squared away with the bylaws themselves. So let me just double check my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, so the goal would be to basically have the bylaws come as an agenda item in either next month or November, with the goal of then adopting a newly amended bylaw by the end of the year or the following month. So, okay. And then I wanted to share some of the more important updates per this new policy. So there aren't too many major changes from what there were before, but I did want to highlight a few items and give you all some reminders of things. So per the policy, individual members can attend the HALRB meetings virtually for a personal matter, no more than 2 meetings per year. It used to be that you couldn't attend meetings for personal matters consecutively, that you couldn't attend virtually consecutively for a personal matter. That's no longer the case. So if you needed to attend back-to-back meetings for virtually for a personal matter, you can do that now. There are exceptions to the rule. So they're all listed up here. Basically, that rule doesn't apply. The virtual attendance doesn't apply if you are temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition prevents the member's physical attendance. If a family member's medical condition requires the member to provide care for their family member, or if the member is a caregiver as defined by Virginia Code, who must provide care for a person with a disability at the time of the meeting. So people who have those conditions, it would be a medical condition and you are allowed to attend meetings virtually for those reasons. And there isn't a limitation on how many meetings you can attend per year for those situations. The newest part is that if a member attends virtually under the title of caregiver, or if the member has a disability that necessitates their virtual participation, then they can count towards quorum as if they were physically present. That is new. It used to be that we had to have physical quorum like in the room. People who are attending virtually for those conditions are allowed to count towards quorum, which is more for staff to remember than for you all to remember, but I'm putting it out there so you all know that as well. I still have to put the reason people are attending virtually in the minutes. So if you email me and say I need to attend virtually, let me know. You can just say it's medical, I'm caregiving, or you can say it's personal, but I do have to also note the location in which where you're taking the meeting virtually. So make sure you give me, it doesn't have to be your address. It can just be the city you're in and the state you're in. And that's plenty for me to put into the minutes. And then lastly, if you are attending virtually, your camera has to be on at all times and you have to be visible. So Dick has been doing a great job this meeting of an example for us. But this is brand new. So you're moving forward. We're asking that all the HALRB members use the Teams link and to call in with your camera on. So using the phone option isn't an option anymore if you want to be counted as participating in the meeting. So I'm sorry to say if you're virtual, you can't get up to go get snacks and you can't get up to go to the bathroom because you'll go off camera. If you do, I just have to note that you're absent for the meeting, and it might mean that if it happens right before a vote that we have to delay things, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of information to throw at you. Are there any questions about anything that I've brought forward? And it's very interesting. Okay, so moving forward, I'm going to send out the bylaws. If any of you have thoughts about them, aside from the electronic meeting policy, feel free to let me know. But we will work on that and then try to get that presented to you all, hopefully in the next meeting, if not that, November. And then, oh yeah, I forgot. I didn't put a slide up for it. Okay, I have one more thing for you all. This is a friendly reminder that it is that time of year again for us to fill out the Certified Local Government Annual Report, which necessitates that everybody on the commission complete some sort of training. So you probably remember my emails last year asking for your training documentation so that I could give that to the Department of Historic Resources so that we can keep our CLG status. So I will send an email with all of this, but since I have you all here, the time period that we're reporting for is October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024. So you still have about 2 weeks to complete a training if you haven't done so already. And the educational training can be a lot of different things. It can be a history-focused lecture. It can be a house tour. I know a lot of you tend to take classes to keep up with your accreditations and things like that. Those can count. It can be a walking tour, museum event, a video or webinar or conference even. So if you've done any of that in that time frame, feel free to just send me an email with that information so that I can include it in our report. But I will follow up with an email to remind you all. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask. And I will also send some opportunities just in case you all haven't been able to get the training in, although it sounds like most of you have been able to do it. But we have lots of options you can complete in the next 2 weeks if need be.
That would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Does it have to occur in Arlington?
No.
Oh.
No. Yeah, it could be anywhere.
Does it have to be like hyper focused on like preservation, or can it be more?
It can be a bit more broad. Yeah, like if you yeah, exactly. I would say if it's history related, then it's okay.
And do we need to describe the event to you, or just the title and a date?
The description would be helpful, but it doesn't have to be a paragraph or anything like that.
Okay.
Just like a sentence of what it was on would help me. Yeah.
Okay.
And I know last year I listened to a couple podcasts that Serena had suggested, and they were more like city planning and like a couple like indivisible strong towns.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting and helpful for me.
Yeah, we
That's
found
a good suggestion.
we just looked on the Preservation Virginia website and they've got some online free kind of webinars that you could go to as well. I often go to the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation for Section 106 training. So if there's certain things that you feel can kind of relate, I think that you can get creative. But it does, I wish we had known a little bit sooner so we could give a little bit more of a heads up, but 2 weeks is not too bad. So
I bet if we think through it, we've all done
I
something.
think just the things that you
Yeah.
mentioned about going to
Yeah.
Charlottesville
Yeah.
alone might be enough. And, I'm sorry, Joe, that you don't get to, you're doing all of the
Well, you're going-
touring and all.
Oh, that's after the 30th.
Might be able to count, or at least you have yours done for the following.
Jerry's
I
actually.
think I've already
done
submitted
it.
some, and I did another one last weekend, but I guess that.
Perfect.
Jerry's already got his, but that will count towards next year.
Yes.
So how'd you
Is it 1 hour?
It doesn't even have a,
I thought you said
It
September.
doesn't even have a time.
Yeah.
it doesn't really have a time.
It's until September
12
30th.
hours of CLE.
Yes.
Last weekend.
Oh,
Yeah,
perfect. I thought you said
yeah.
October.
But there's not really a time limit of how long it needs to be or that it needs to be in person. It just needs to be some type of training and try and see if it can relate as much as possible to
Yeah.
how you serve on the sport.
Right. That was it for us. Thank you.
I just have a comment that I want to thank DRC and staff for the consent agenda, because I thought that the DRC did a great job of looking at all of the issues that were potential with these projects and resolving them. And then the staff reports were just all extremely helpful. And I just want to thank you, because it made going through everything. At first I thought I might want to have more information about one of them, but then I went and looked at the staff report carefully and questions answered.
And the
So-
fact that you attached so many plans and illustrations, and so a lot of the questions that came up, you
Yeah.
could find the answer easily. It was very well put together.
So, just wanted to say that because it made a huge difference in knowing what the consent agenda was all about and knowing that it had been looked at carefully, and so we didn't have to look at it again.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Anything else for good of the order? Comments, concerns, questions? All right, well, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe, for saying that. I had
Good thing.
really traced.
Well, I did appreciate it, because I was sensitive.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Online. Take care.
Speaking of
Bye, Robert.
era
Bye,
things, and
Carmela.
historic things.
Bye. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Stay well. Arlington Players has last weekend of Little Women the Musical. And having